Hi, welcome to an episode of Spectator Sports with Sebastian Fonseca. Today's episode, we're going to be covering the NCAA title game between Kansas and UNC, some breaking NFL news between the New Orleans Saints and the Philadelphia Eagles in the upcoming NFL draft, and breaking down UEFA Champions League quarterfinals amongst the first legs that just concluded on Wednesday afternoon. For starters, the matchup between UNC and Kansas was a clash of two historic programs in college basketball. We had Bill Self going for his second championship, first since the 2008 championship against Memphis, and Coach Hubert Davis's debut in the national championship game for UNC. And UNC started off to a rough start. They came out cold, definitely had some nervous, anxious energy that kind of reflected a similar start against the Duke Blue Devils in the Final Four matchup on Saturday. And after they settled in, they got into such a big rhythm. After the score was tied at 22-22 about midway through the first half, UNC reeled off 16 straight unanswered points and took a 15-point lead into halftime. And at that point, you really thought that the rout was on for UNC, but Kansas was able to hang around, and after cutting the lead to single digits very quickly to start the second half, it was pretty much a nip and tuck game from there on out. With about 5 minutes to go, it was lead change after lead change amongst the two programs. And with Kansas being able to hold on with a few big defensive stops towards the end and to win the national championship. Some things I noticed though in the first half was that the UNC bigs really controlled the glass and the paint. There was a 20-2 advantage in terms of second chance points that was in the first half, and after the Kansas comeback was fueled by several UNC turnovers. This led to being the largest comeback in NCAA title game history. And after looking through some of the box score and notes, the Jayhawks got some really big contributions from guys like Remy Martin, Braun, and Wilson. In the first half, that trio combined for 9 total points, and in the second half, they were a huge proponent of their comeback bid and contributing 32 points combined. And in the second half, going back to the turnover point, it was a 14-2 advantage in favor of the Jayhawks. This really led to them being able to hold off UNC towards the end. The last few minutes were very nip and tuck, like I mentioned. After UNC took a brief 69-68 lead, it was all Kansas from there on out, where they got clutch basket after clutch basket. I remember there was a really interesting exchange after they made a go-ahead hook shot to take a 3-point lead within the last 16 seconds or so. UNC had a chance to either at least go for a quick 2 or go for the tie and send this game into overtime. They took about 2 good outside looks, and then Manic grabbed the rebound and unfortunately threw it away to the corner. And pretty much then it felt like Kansas had this game on lock. But on the inbound pass, which was fine, all they had to do basically at that point was hold on to the ball and then make their free throws, and you're national champions. However, upon the inbound pass, the point guard for Kansas stepped out of bounds while inbounding or receiving the inbound pass, and this gave possession back to UNC after a lengthy review. With this, UNC got a play drawn up probably for Manic, who I was thinking was pretty much been their most reliable 3-point shooter for this tournament. Unfortunately, he slipped coming out of his break in the formation, so it was pretty much a broken play from there. And at that point, they had to chuck up a 3-pointer from about the top of the arc, barely grazed the rim, and that was it. Kansas was champions for this second time under Bill Self's coaching tenure. Amongst the recent, want to say, title of now best coach in NCAA hoops with Coach K's retirement, we could make a case for Bill Self being up there amongst Jay Wright and probably Kentucky's Coach John Calipari, as amongst the top coaches in NCAA hoops. For our next topic, I was going to talk about the breaking news between the Eagles and the Saints, where the Eagles came into the 2022 draft with 3 first-round picks, one being their own, another being a trade between Miami and the Eagles that last year resulted in the Eagles trading back from 6 to 12 and taking on a second a first-round pick for the 2022 draft. And as a result of the Carson Wentz trade between Indianapolis and Philly, that yielded another first-round pick as well for the 2022 draft. And with this means, like I said, Philly would have 3 first-round picks, the first being 15, the second being 16, and the last being 19. And those are huge assets to have in such a very talented, especially defensive-heavy first-round set of talent. The Saints, with the recent quarterback news of them re-signing Jameis Winston, appears to seem that they're trying to gear up some ammo to either trade up and take a quarterback or another weapon to help fuel New Orleans' offense. And with the trade, the Eagles have traded the 16th, 19th, and a 6th-round pick to the Saints in exchange for the 18th pick, 3rd-round pick being number 101, and the 237th pick in the 2022 draft. And additionally, they got a 2023 first-round pick and a 2024 second-round pick. And I thought this was a total win for the Eagles at the moment. You now still have 2 first-round picks in a very similar range that you originally were picking not too long ago, and now you have an extra first-round pick for the 2023 draft. And this kind of goes into the conversations at the Eagles QB situation. Quarterback Jalen Hurts had a very solid year, I must say, as a first-year starter, full-time starter for the Eagles last year. He missed 2 games due to injury, but in his time starting, he played pretty well using his legs and his arm. Some people are still saying that the Eagles are not convinced with his arm and his play, which is true. He's only in year 2, and there's definitely strides to be made to improve as a passer, but in a new system, he made a lot of good strides. He didn't have the best of weapons outside of Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert last year, and there wasn't really a really consistent scheme where it was really pass heavy for the first 6 or so games, and then the Eagles transitioned to a run heavy offense featuring guys like Myles Garrett, Boston Scott, a little bit of Jordan Howard, and even Jalen Hurts himself, who had 10 touchdowns on the ground as well last year. Miles Sanders, my apologies. So with that 3-man running attack, in addition to Jalen Hurts, they plan to build some assets that can help Jalen out right now, especially on the defensive end, and in the future, whether Jalen proves himself in 2022 to be the starter moving forward for the Eagles, or in case he were to flame out, the Eagles now have ammo to move up and take their quarterback in a 2023 draft that's going to be a lot of great QB talent coming into the NFL. From the Saints' perspective, I'm not entirely sure what their game plan is moving forward. With them having Jameis, obviously they're going to try and run this back and see what they can do. And Jameis did play pretty well, I must say, in the amount of starts that he played prior to his ACL injury. The videos that he's posted seem to be that he's recovering well with his rehab and progressing, but we never know how people or players respond from ACL injuries. So whether it's retooling the offense, that will be getting back guys like Michael Thomas, who was out all of last year, and hopefully a fully healthy Alvin Kamara. They can do some things on the offensive end or make some moves on the defensive end as well. Going back to the Eagles, I would like to say that there are definitely a lot of needs in the defensive side of the football. This draft, like I said, has so many different avenues for defensive talent, whether it be linebackers, edge rushers, namely guys like Kayvon Thibodeau and Aiden Hutchinson out of Michigan. Those guys obviously will be taken within at least the top 5 picks, if not the top 10. So they definitely will not be there for the Eagles at 15. But there's a lot of cornerbacks out there, and I have a feeling that if a guy like Sauce Gardner or were to slip past, let's say, pick 9, that they could try to make a move and try to scoop him up before teams that really need a cornerback like the Minnesota Vikings or the Baltimore Ravens. So that would be a move I would certainly approve on, taking a guy like Sauce Gardner. If not, staying at 15 is totally fine. Take the best pass rusher available or best linebacker available. And then with the second pick, probably take the best wide receiver available or vice versa. Obviously, we all know that the draft is now about 3 weeks away and it's a very chaotic night in the NFL. So I'm sure there are going to be more trades come draft night as well. For the next topic, I wanted to get into the recent UEFA Champions League play. On Tuesday, we had Manchester City take on Atletico Madrid and Liverpool playing Benfica in Portugal. Man City had a pretty good showing against Atletico Madrid, who also had a good showing of their own with a very interesting lineup and defensive tactics. However, they weren't able to come off with a victory, yielding a 1-0 loss to a nice strike from Kevin De Bruyne, giving Man City a solid 1-0 lead heading into the second leg. And it's still, I would say, very much up in the air, but the fact that Man City can play from now more of a defensive mindset and maybe get another insurance goal, I say is going to play in their favor. The Atletico side actually didn't really even have a shot on goal or a shot at all in the match. They had some good runs, but in the final third, they weren't really able to finish, and we'll see if they'll be able to recreate that and actually finish some good runs that they had with guys like Antonio Griezmann. Going on to the Liverpool-Benfica game, it seemed Liverpool was poised to start strong, and they did. Goals from Konate and Mane, who was assisted on from Luis Diaz, and before that he had a beautiful setup pass from Trent Arnold-Alexander, giving them an early 2-0 lead. Benfica was able to come back and get a goal of their own, cutting the deficit to 2-1. However, Luis Diaz was able to put in a third goal towards the closing minutes, and Liverpool came up with a 3-1 win, with them heading back to the Anfield now with 2 goals in hand on aggregate. The second legs will be transpiring within a week's time, so it's a very quick turnaround from the quarterfinal stage onwards. So they will probably have to manage the lineups accordingly. Obviously, with Man City and Liverpool going head to head, it's going to be both managers, Jurgen Klopp and Pep Guardiola. They're going to probably go into prioritizing the Premier League title, but also figuring out things for their upcoming Champions League matchups. So tweaking the lineups is definitely going to happen. It's just a matter of how exactly they're going to plan things out. It's a very tricky thing for sure between resting guys and then also prioritizing trophies in different leagues. So I can understand the conundrum there. In today's action, we had Bayern Munich taking on Villarreal and Real Madrid heading to Stamford Bridge to take on Chelsea. Villarreal actually was able to take an early lead in the 8th minute and hold on for a 1-0 victory on their home field, and they will be heading to Bayern Munich Stadium to play the second leg, already up a goal in hand on aggregate. And if I'm Bayern, I'm obviously a little concerned, but obviously they have some moving parts. Today was Alphonso Davies' first match since December, since some heart complications due to COVID in the later part of last year. And I believe they'll be more comfortable with another league match under the belt probably in the weekend, and I still would favor Bayern, despite the deficit, to be able to pull that rabbit out of their hat and progress to the semifinals on aggregate. The other game that was going on was probably the most interesting game, at least on paper, between Real Madrid and Chelsea. And Real started off just basically where they left off, where it was Karim Benzema's show. Karim put on a fantastic display, his second hat-trick in as many games. We already know what he did to PSG. He basically recreated the same output in the 21st and 24th minutes with two headers, one set up by Vinicius and the other one set up by Luka Modric. And Chelsea was already behind very early on their home soil. And that was certainly concerning. You could say the first goal was kind of fluky. It was just a really good angle, good contact for the header. But still, gotta give credit where credit is due, and Real was able to execute those crosses very well, and proved to be 2 goals early on. Kai Havertz was able to come back with a goal of his own and was able to cut the deficit to 2-1 just before halftime. And you thought Chelsea would be able to be in better shape moving on if they would go into Real Madrid with a 1-goal deficit is far more manageable than a 2-goal deficit. And unfortunately, just after halftime, Chelsea's goalkeeper Iodar Mendy came up with a very, very poor clearance, and this was intercepted by Karim Benzema, again completing his hat-trick, and they were up 3-1 after the 46th minute and really didn't look back after that. No goals since that. There were opportunities. Mason Mount had a nice opportunity that just sailed over the bar. There was a very, very good header opportunity from Romelu Lukaku, who came off the bench, subbed in for Christian Pulisic, and just missed the outside of the far post. And unfortunately, he did miss that. So as it stands now, the standings for the aggregate score is going to be 3-1. And Chelsea definitely has a tall task heading into that second leg. Can it be done? Absolutely. This is Champions League, and we've seen sides come back from larger deficits before. I can think of a few from 2019 being Liverpool's comeback from 3-0 down, 3-0 down to Barcelona, and then a comeback between Ajax and Tottenham, where Tottenham scored 3 goals away and were able to come back from a 2-goal deficit. So, yeah, it can be done 100%. We'll see what the tweaks are in the lineup that Thomas Tuchel can make. Hopefully, the biggest thing is they don't want to give up any more goals. And if it gets into a scenario where they can tie it, it would go obviously into extra time. And if it was tied after that, we would have penalty kicks. So we haven't had a penalty kick shootout in quite some time in the Champions League, and we'll see if that's going to happen in this game in the quarterfinals. And for the final topic for today, we're going to shift to the NBA. We had the Lakers be eliminated from all postseason contention on Tuesday night, suffering a 11-point loss by the score of 121-110 to the Phoenix Suns. And this finally puts the Lakers out of their suffering entirely. They've had mishap after mishap in the 2022 season, whether it be injuries, Russ's inability to integrate himself into the lineup, roster mismanagement, the age of the roster. We could talk about that until the cows come home. But we should definitely reflect on how the Lakers really got to this stage. From the jump, we can say that LeBron James has been kind of the de facto GM for every team that he is on. He has kind of a huge say in who gets to be on the roster, who isn't on the roster. We saw him take a little bit more of that on his own after leaving Miami in 2014 and him having a say in what Cleveland does with their roster. He was a huge proponent of David Griffin's trade for Kevin Love, and then them getting other pieces like J.R. Smith, Richard Jefferson, signing other free agents. We know the whole deal. And he did a similar thing when he came to the Lakers in 2018. He had a factor in them signing some players. And then obviously in the offseason of 2019, he was a huge factor and probably the factor of them training for Anthony Davis. So in the 2019 offseason, Anthony Davis was traded from the New Orleans Pelicans to the LA Lakers, and that was obviously immediately paid off into the 2020 NBA championship. LeBron had a say in numerous other offseason moves, them re-signing guys like Rajon Rondo, re-signing KCP, them bringing on Dwight Howard. Those are kind of the bigger names. Even J.R. Smith was back for another stint on the 2020 Lakers. Those moves obviously paid off, and you could say you need to give LeBron credit for doing his homework. Can facilitate those kind of moves to yield that 2020 NBA championship. So obviously you have to give LeBron credit for orchestrating that. You could all give credit to Rob Pelinka or Jeannie Buss. Of course, they do own and manage the team from a general management perspective as well. From that point onwards, the roster began to decay. We saw a small sample of that when they attempted to retool in their 2021 campaign, deciding to not re-sign Dwight Howard and putting that money in for a guy like Montrezl Harrell. They brought in Dennis Schroeder from OKC via trade, and those were kind of the bigger acquisitions. They picked up Andre Drummond on the buyout market, and definitely showed that some of those moves didn't turn out to be a good fit at all. Dennis shrank under the pressure of the LA media and in the playoffs against Phoenix. They tried to reintegrate and have Marc Gasol try to be a passing five, which was good on paper, but Marc Gasol unfortunately was way past his prime, too slow-footed to guard the bigs like Nikola Jokic or guys like when if teams go small, like the Clippers, for example, they would have Nicholas Batum at the five, and then Marc Gasol was kind of put on an island in those circumstances. So that roster obviously also took a different turn after injuries to Anthony Davis and LeBron himself, and those issues again reiterated themselves in the 2022 campaign. LeBron had injuries to his ankle and knee, and also had a bout with COVID as well, testing positive that caused him to miss games earlier on, and that kind of influenced the chemistry. It was up to AD and Russell Westbrook to kind of right the ship until LeBron was able to come back and be healthy. And still then, the team wasn't able to hold leads. I remember them blowing 2 large leads to the Thunder early on in the season. And a lot of that could be placed on, of course, Russell Westbrook. He's led the league in turnovers during this season, and he's been the most healthy Laker for sure. But his play has not translated into any type of success this year. You can see that you could say, sure, you're putting too much blame on Russell Westbrook, or the criticism or the name calling or the trolling is uncalled for, but players back in the day, they were called names. LeBron himself was called LeBrick or a choker, or Queen James, for example, and LeBron was able to persevere. So the whole naming Westbrook kind of trolling, I can understand how it's hard, but those things kind of come on with an athlete. You're going to be trolled, you're going to be subject to criticism, and his arrogance, his lack of care for the ball, as long as Russell Westbrook gets his stats, his triple doubles, he was fine with. And that happened in OKC, that happened in Washington, not so much in Houston, but he had good stats, so he wasn't really at a point of blame or focus. But the years he averaged the triple-double, he was able to basically take or devalue what a triple-double actually means. You could look at his shooting percentages were not very good. He had countless performances in Washington where he would shoot well below 40%, and his free throw percentage also continued to decline, and that's something very fundamental that a point guard should have in the NBA. In terms of the percentage of blame, I would say he would have a significant role. I would say about 25% if I were to do some numbers. Obviously, though, he wouldn't be here if it wasn't thanks to LeBron's okay on that. Many reports said that LeBron was against or nixed the trade that would have brought a guy like Buddy Hield, and he also was against the Lakers signing DeMar DeRozan. And we don't know exactly what the fit would be with DeMar and LeBron on the same court, but I think we can definitely say, though, he would fit in a little more seamlessly, and it wouldn't be an awkward fit. DeMar is obviously kind of today's master of the mid-range. He was able to fit in pretty well with a guy like Zach LaVine, who does patrol more of the perimeter, but also takes some mid-range shots or takes some inside shots. So that was able to gel quite well. I'm sure LeBron would be able to facilitate and use his passing ability to put him into areas of success, and it wouldn't necessarily crowd the paint and give Anthony Davis the adequate space to work with as well. The trade for Buddy Hield would have only cost the Lakers probably some picks and Kyle Kuzma. That was the only real player that the Kings wanted at the time. However, the trade for Russell Westbrook forced them to give up numerous picks, KCP, Montrezl Harrell, and also Kyle Kuzma as well. And it clearly shows that the Wizards were winners of that trade in that Russell Westbrook trade. Regardless or not, I mean, the player LeBron, he's probably going to finish second in the league in scoring, put up about 30 points and 6 assists, 8 rebounds. Great stat line, very efficient play as always. But the management side of LeBron is probably more of the lion's share to blame. He gave it everything he had on the court, but the off the court in terms of managing the roster gives him significant blame for sure. The other topic for the blame game here for the 2022 Lakers, we could say, is Anthony Davis. His inability to be healthy has been kind of the thing that's plagued him throughout his entire career, and it's been emphasized astronomically in the last 2 seasons. In the last 2 seasons, albeit in a COVID-shortened season last year, he played only 50% of the games. And then this year, he's probably going to replicate that in a full 82-game season. He's been dinged, he's been injured, and then those are severe injuries, and then it's messed up the chemistry of the Lakers. He's had numerous injuries in his days in New Orleans. And that was certainly the concern when they made that move back in 2019 of trading for a guy like him. People rave about him being a top 5 NBA talent, but his play has not reflected that, especially after the championship season in 2020. So I understand, like, you know, he has that talent, he has that repertoire, but there's no way, you know, he's going to be able to replicate that going forward. Obviously, he's going to be older. He has a lot of NBA miles on him despite the injuries. So I would say that his best days are past him, and, you know, the Lakers might have to consider trading him just to get up and under this Westbrook contract moving forward. Unless he is committed to doing something to maintain his health, which remains to be seen. He cannot be mentioned with guys like, you know, Giannis or Nikola Jokic or Joel Embiid as the best big men in the NBA. Those three have done so much more for this league, so much more better performances either in the regular season with their health and availability, and also the postseason as well. And they also have the awards to back it up. It seems like Joel Embiid is only a few games away from wrapping up possibly his first MVP trophy. Nikola Jokic already has a MVP trophy from last year's campaign, and also obviously Giannis has a Defensive Player of the Year, 2 MVPs as in his trophy case. So we could next talk about the ownership having their own issues in this Lakers debacle. But the problem is, like I said, with any LeBron James-led team, you're kind of at the mercy of the superstar. And it's not just LeBron. I mean, Kevin Durant has kind of taken the Nets by hostage, them having to placate to what he wants in the roster, dealing with the whole Kyrie Irving nonsense. So the league has become now a player-first league, which is great. But some players have now been having way too much power in an organization, and they've in turn had some issues in managing the roster coincidentally as well. And that's it for this episode of Spectator Sports. I hope to see you again later this week when we review the back end of the week's events in sports. So until next time, take care.